The shift method removes the first element from an array. So let's try an example out. So I have an array of numbers starting from 1 to 4. So we reference that array and add dot shift. So when you try to log out the array, you can see the first element will be removed from the array. Let's try that out. Okay. The Unshaped method adds one or more elements to the beginning of an array, unlike the shift method, and returns the new length of the array. So let's try an example out. So in here I create an array of numbers. So we reference that array and add dot unshift and pass in the values we want to place at the beginning of the array. So I will start with 1 and 2, and when we log it out, we can see 1 and 2 will be in front of the array. There we go. The pop method, on the other hand, removes the last element from an array. So let's try an example out. So I have an array of names, that's John, Jaron, and James. So we reference that array and add dot pop, and when we try to log out the array, you see James will be removed from the array. The push method, on the other hand, adds an element or a variable to an array. So let's try an example out. So I have an array of numbers starting from 1 to 4. So we reference that array and add dot push. I want to push onto that 5 and 6. So when you try to log out the array, you can see it starts from 1 to 6. There we go. The sort method sorts the elements of an array in place and returns the sorted array. So in here I have an array of fruits. So we reference that array and add dot sort, and we realize that it will sort it according to an alphabetical order. So when you try to log out the array, you see it will be sorted according to an alphabetical order. The splice method changes the contents of an array by either removing or replacing the existing array. So let's try an example. So I have an array of foods in here. So we reference that array and add dot splice. I want to start removing from the third index. So we replace the index with 2 and we'll start removing it from the third index. So when you try to log out the array, you can see it returns only the first and the second item and start removing from the third index. There we go. So let's try to specify the start and end of the fruit. So we want to start removing from the second index and end on the third index and replace onto that a different item. So when you try to log it out, you can see the second and third index has been replaced with a different item, and that's how the slice method works. The slice method returns a shallow copy of an array into a new array selected from the start to the end, and notice the end is not included, where the start and end represent the index of the array. So let's try an example out. So I have a weather conditions in here. So I'll create another variable, and that's going to be today's weather. That's the variable name, and I'll reference the weather condition array and add on to that dot slice, and I want to start from the second index and ends on the third index. So 1 and 3 will be within the slice, and when I try to log out the today's weather, you can see it returns only snow and sleet, because it starts from snow and end on sleet, and doesn't include the third index, that's the hail. The reverse method reverses the order of the elements in an array. So let's try an example out. So I create an array that contains numbers starting from 1 to 5. So I'll reference that array and add on to that dot reverse, and when we try to log out the array, you can see it starts from 5 to 1. Let's run it. There we go. And that's how the reverse method works in JavaScript. The includes method. In JavaScript, includes method determines whether a string contains the given character within it or not. So I'll start by creating an array that contains a string of animals, that's cat, dog, and cow, and I'll create another variable. That variable is going to name search animal, and it's going to reference the array dot includes, that's the method, and pass on to that cat. So, and when we try to log out the search animal variable, you can see it will return as true, meaning cat is found within the array. The index of method retains the position of the first occurrence of a value in a string. The index of method returns -1 if the value is not found. So in here I have an array of colors. So I will console.log and reference the colors array dot index of. So in this situation I want to know the index of red. So when I hit run, it returns 1, and that's red has index of 1. When I check out for green, it has index of 3. When I check out for color which is not found within the array, it returns -1, and that's how the index of works in JavaScript. The fill method fills the specified elements in an array with a value. The fill method overwrites the original array, and start and end position can be specified as well. So let's try an example. So I created an array of this fruit or foods. So I'll reference that array and add .fill. So in this situation, I want to fill the entire array with a grape. So if I log it out, console.log the array, you can see it replaces the entire array with the grapes fruit. So when I try to specify the start of the fill method, it will start filling it from the second index. There we go. When I try to specify the end of the fill method, it will start at the second index and end on the third index, and that's how the fill method works. The concat method is used to merge 2 or more arrays. So let's try an example out. So I created an array, first array that starts from 1 to 4, and also the second array starting from 5 to 7. So I'll create another array variable, name it as array3, and that's going to reference the first array dot concat the second array. So when we try to log out array3 and run it on the console, you can see the array2 has been added to array1. The sum method tests whether at least one element in the array passes the test implemented by the provided function. It returns true if it passes and false if it doesn't. So let's create an array that consists of years. That's 2010, 2012, 2015, 2017, 2020, and 2022, and 2021. So I'll create another variable in here, and I'm going to name that variable greater than 15. Okay, so I'll reference that year and add .sum. It takes in a function. That function going to take in the year as a parameter and checks if the year is greater than 2015. So if one of these tests passes, it's going to return as true. So when you try to console.log the variable greater than 15 and run it, you can see it returns true because one of the array elements passes test. The every method tests whether all elements in the array pass the test implemented by the provided function, and it returns a Boolean value. So I'll use the same example in here. So in here I will try to reference the year .every. I want to check if the year is greater than 15 and log out the variable greater than 15, and it returns as false. So when I try to remove that very year and run it again, it returns as true, meaning the element in the array passes the test, and that's how the every method works. The filter method creates a new array filled with elements that passes a test provided by a function, and the filter method does not execute a function for empty element, and the filter element does not change the original array. So here is an example. Let's create an array of numbers starting from 1 to 10, and I also create a variable in here. I'm going to name that variable filtered array, and it's going to be it's going to reference the array and add.filter, which takes in a function. And here we are interested in the value, the element, and for each element we want to find the modulus 2 of that. If it is equal to 0, then it checks for even numbers, and when we try to log out the filtered array and run it, you can see it returns all the even numbers within the array. When we check the equal to sign to not equal to, which means we are interested in the odd numbers, it returns all the odd numbers within the array. And when we try to check for number greater than 5, it starts from 6 to 10. That's how the filter method works. The map method in JavaScript creates an array by calling a specific function on each element present in the parent array. So let's try an example out. So I'll start by creating an array of numbers that starts from 1 to 5. I'll create a variable, and I'm going to name this variable as mapped array. And this mapped array is going to reference the array and add.map. So in here it has a callback function with x as a parameter. Want to multiply each element in the array by 2. So when you try to console.log the mapped array, you'll be getting each element within the array multiplied by 2, twice of that. There we go. You see we have 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. That's how the map works. The reduce method in JavaScript is used to reduce an array to a single value and execute a provided function for each value of the array. And the return value of the function is stored in an accumulator. So let's try an example out. So I'll create a variable in here, array, that starts from 1 to 5. So I'll create a variable in here and name it as reduce, and that's going to reference the array and add.reduce. It has a callback function and also the initial value. So initial value is going to be 0 in here by default. So the callback function has access to the accumulator and the value, and we are interested in adding the value onto the accumulator. So the reduce method reduces the array to a single value. So it will be adding the array, the elements in the array. So when you try to log out the reduce, you can see we had 15. The join method returns an array as a string. The join method does not change the original array. So let's try an example out. So I'll create an array in here. That's going to be a string of A, a string of B, a string of C, and a string of D. So we reference that array, or let me create a variable in here and name it as joined. So, and that's going to reference that array and add.joined, just like that. So when we try to log out the joined, you can see it returns as A, B, C, and D. There we go.